Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Creating Change. My name is Jillian Walsh, and I'm a registered dietitian as well as a registered psychotherapist qualifying here in Canada. I'm an eating disorder specialist that works primarily with children and youth affected by an eating disorder as well as their parents. So today we are here to talk all about starvation syndrome. And starvation syndrome is a physical complication of an eating disorder. So if you've been listening to some of our other videos, oftentimes what you'll hear me say is that an eating disorder starts as a mental health concern, all up in the brain, but it very quickly deteriorates into a physical health condition. One of those key conditions is called starvation syndrome. So before we talk about what starvation syndrome is, I want you folks to know that it can impact folks of any weight. It can also impact individuals of any eating disorder diagnosis. So what that means is that regardless if somebody is diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or OSFED, otherwise known as otherwise specified feeding and eating disorders, it does not matter what the diagnosis is, anybody can suffer from starvation syndrome. So, starvation syndrome is a physical complication where the body is impacted not only physiologically, but emotionally, cognitively, and socially. It is a repercussion or a side effect of severe malnutrition. So when the body is not getting the nutrition it needs, there are a lot of systems within the body that need to shut down in order to preserve life. The big piece that happens first is things like slowed heart rate, slowed blood pressure, decreased concentration, increased irritability, and that's just to name a few. What's key to hear is that starvation syndrome can impact all aspects of somebody's life. So we're not just talking about the physical aspect of malnutrition, which of course is important, but then there's also the emotional piece. So oftentimes folks that are suffering with starvation syndrome will appear quite flat, and they report feeling very numb. On the cognitive level, oftentimes folks that are suffering from starvation syndrome have a very hard time concentrating, and you'll notice that their performance decreases. And then of course on the social level, we start to see this quite early on, is that folks living with an eating disorder, especially those that are in that starving state, tend to isolate themselves. So they start to avoid social settings. They might avoid eating in the cafeteria. They might avoid going to family dinners or out on a date at a restaurant. So those are all aspects in which the social lives of somebody living with an eating disorder and also suffering from starvation syndrome, it's a way that they can suffer that isn't directly, obviously linked back to the eating disorder. A lot of folks say to me, hey, I've noticed that my child hasn't been interested in joining us at the movies, or they have been a lot colder than usual. What's happening? What do you think that's about? Oftentimes, it's the signs of starvation syndrome that first raise the red flags about an eating disorder, instead of the actual eating disorder itself. So keep that in mind. If you're a parent in care, can you tell me about what is one of the signs of starvation syndrome that you've seen in your child? Let me know in the comments below, because I'll be there. I want to see and I want to hear what everybody else is experiencing. I see folks each and every day living with eating disorder, and of course they are most often in that starvation mode. But what I want to hear is from the parents that are in the home 24/7 supporting your child. What are you seeing? Because of course in the office, when I'm in my therapist role or my dietitian role, I see a very different picture than what the parents are seeing at home. And I want to hear about it. So the other thing I want folks to think about is, if starvation syndrome is a medical condition, then there must be a cure or a treatment, right? Absolutely. So keep in mind, starvation syndrome comes with a treatment, and that treatment is renourishment. It is eating food again, meeting that person's nutritional needs to reverse the starvation syndrome. This is most commonly known as the refeeding process. So I'm going to talk all about that process in our next video. Before you take off, make sure that you click like and subscribe down below, and then turn on the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. That's where you'll hear all about the refeeding process. Thanks for tuning in.